How we doing, everybody? I have got a question for you. When you sign with the UFC, how many fights does it take until you get a shot at the gold? Until you get a shot or a chance to be the champion of the world, to sit atop of the combat sports world? Well, the answer is, there is no answer, because it always depends on a number of things. Of course, the old-fashioned way and the normal path that most fighters go through or go down or walk is, you beat all the other competition. And more often than not, that is what we see. Okay, you sign with the promotion, you do very well, you become ranked, you work your way up the rankings, you become the #1 contender, and then the champ has no choice but to throw down. And if you get the job done, you become the champ, right? And that can be a fast path. It can be a slow path. I mean, look at my path, for crying out loud. It took me 26 fights in the UFC. I had a record of 29-7, and as I say, on my 26th fight, finally did it. That's called taking the slow path. That's taking the long road. But not everyone does that. Some people go quicker. Next weekend, we have Yuri Prochazka fighting for the light heavyweight championship of the world against Glover Teixeira. Now, Glover Teixeira, much like me, at 43 years old, this man became champion when he had a record of 32-7, and he won the belt on his 21st fight. But on the flip side, we've got Yuri Prochazka, a guy that is so unusual, so unique, so unorthodox, and very, very powerful. He is fighting for the UFC strap on only his 3rd fight. And that is a crazy rise through the ranks. But circumstances, that is what happens. Listen, a lot of the time the situation depends on circumstances. For example, if you are extremely talented, if you come from another promotion, you have a huge reputation, okay, you are known or widely regarded that outside of the UFC you are one of the best in the world, well then when you come over here, if you prove yourself and you live up to that reputation, then you might get a title fight. Of course, popularity does play a factor, whether you like it or not. That's just the way it goes. If you're wildly popular, generally that will be because you're a tremendous fighter at the same time, and also because you have a huge following. Okay, there's other factors to consider as well, such as the state of the current division. If that division, if the champion at the top has wiped the floor with all the opposition, then they need fresh meat. Kind of like Israel Adesanya. He's running through the middleweight division. Alex Pereira, a kickboxer that signed with the UFC, who's beaten Izzy twice, once by decision, once by knockout, has had 2 fights in the UFC. He's fighting Sean Strickland. If he gets by Sean Strickland, there's a good possibility that on his 4th fight with the promotion, he gets a shot at gold, because there's a storyline there. They have history. Much like when I fought Dan Henderson for the belt. When I defended the belt against Dan Henderson, a lot of people were annoyed. Okay, they said, well, that doesn't make sense. But Dan Henderson had just got a massive victory on the same night that I won the belt, and he knocked me out bloody 7 years prior. Guess what? Storylines sell, okay? And storylines are important, and there was history there, and there was hopefully a bit of revenge for me down the line. But we're not here to talk about me. Thank God I hear you say. No, we're here to talk about some of the fighters that signed with the UFC that didn't get fast-tracked, because Dana White liked them, or as they got the Dana White privilege, as Tony Ferguson says. No, they got fast-tracked for a variety of reasons, and we're going to go through some of them right now. Now, one of the people that I'm talking about is part of the main event next week. He's fighting Glover Teixeira, talking about Yuri Prochazka. Yuri Prochazka has looked sensational since he came to the UFC. Made his UFC debut against Volkan Oezdemir, one of the top contenders, a guy that had fought for the belt, okay, and he knocked him out, okay. When you follow that up by then fighting Dominick Reyes, a guy that just fought for the belt as well and came up short against Jan Blachowicz, and you knock him out with a spinning elbow combination, yeah, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to fight for the belt next. And that's what happened. And if you look, you do a bit of homework, Yuri Prochazka has a record of 28 wins with 3 losses, 25 knockouts, 2 submissions, and only once has he gone to a decision. And when you go through his record, you see some familiar faces, of course. Reyes, Oezdemir, as I said, CB Dollaway, Fabio Maldonado, Mohamed Lawal, Brandon Halsey, former Bellator champion, and it goes on and on. Lots of great competition outside the UFC, and he's lived up to all the hype, so he certainly deserves it. Who could forget Anderson the Spider Silva? Of course, Anderson, very well-known fighter now, one of the greatest to ever do it. Had a massive reputation, started off down in Brazil, went over to Japan, to Pride, made a great name for himself. Then he came over to the UFC. Fought Chris Lieben in his UFC debut and absolutely destroyed the cat smasher. Made it look easy. And Chris Lieben was known for having a hard head, okay? Chris Lieben even said, oh, Anderson Silva's been fighting easier competition out in Japan. He's going to find out things are a little different out here in America. Well, I think it was something like 45 seconds. Anderson Silva absolutely destroyed him. And then what happened? In his very next fight, he fought Rich Franklin and became the middleweight champion of the world and just went on an absolutely sensational run. Of course, there's my old friend, Dan Henderson, Dan Hollywood Henderson, Decision Dan Henderson, Daniel TRT Henderson, and he's known in certain circles. I'm joking, of course.
All on steroids. All you motherfuckers on steroids.
I have respect for his career. Dan Henderson came over from Pride to the UFC, right? And he fought for the belt immediately. Granted, in Pride, he was the middleweight champion. Came over, fought Quinton Rampage Jackson, UFC 75 in London on pay-per-view, and he came up short, okay? But it was a tremendous fight with Rampage, back and forth. Dan Henderson certainly proved himself worthy, but in his very next fight, not only did he fight for the light heavyweight strap on his first attempt in the UFC, his next fight, his second fight, he fought for the middleweight belt against Anderson Silva. And Anderson Silva finished him off by rear naked choke, if I'm not mistaken. But still, I mean, that is an incredible start to a UFC run. But again, off merit, because he deserved it, because he had a following, because he had history, because he had knockout fucking power. One of the biggest names and the biggest people to sign with the UFC and get a real quick title fight was, of course, the wrestling superstar Brock Lesnar. Listen, this man retired with a record of 5 wins and 3 losses. 8 fights in total. That's not even a lot of fights, but he got his world title fight on his 4th fight. Signed with the UFC, got knee barred against Frank Mir. Then he beat up Heath Herring, and then he fought Randy Couture. Boom! Knocked him out in the 2nd round, and he became champion of the world and defended it against Frank Mir, defended against Shane Carwin, and then, of course, Cain Velasquez. Free Cain, by the way. Cain Velasquez took him to school. But still, Brock Lesnar was an absolute sensation, brought in a tremendous amount of fans and eyeballs, paying eyeballs from the professional wrestling world, and he certainly delivered. As I say, on his 3rd fight, became champion of the world, put on some great performances, a lot of excitement, a lot of great promotion, obviously knows how to play the heel and all that good stuff, you know, has the acting capabilities, but an absolute monster of a man who could clearly fight. Another example, and it's kind of an unusual one, was when Dana White decided to start having females compete in the UFC. Of course, he famously said that would never happen, but due to popular demand and the rise in female talent, you know, it was inevitable at some stage. Now, Ronda Rousey, she was the Strikeforce champion, very, very dominant. She was gifted the belt, so she didn't even have to fight, but it kind of makes sense. She was the biggest name in the sport. But in her UFC debut, she fought Liz Carmouche, right? So Liz Carmouche signed with the UFC. She got to fight for the belt. Ronda defended the belt in her very first fight. So yeah, as I say, that one definitely made history for a number of reasons. Of course, the first female UFC fight to ever take place, and Ronda Rousey coming in, not even having a fight and already being champion. As I said, it was granted, it was warranted, and Liz Carmouche gave her a good going. It was a good fight, it was back and forth, until, of course, Ronda got the finish. Another guy that has provided nothing but excitement since he came to the UFC is the one and only Michael Chandler. Chandler, great wrestler, great guy, great talker, former Bellator champion. Chandler came over from Bellator and said, I'm not here for a long time, I'm here for a good time. And that is what he's had. Michael Chandler's lived up to the hype, my word. But in the theme of what I'm talking about, first fight, 1 fight, Dan Hooker, Fight Island, overhand right, puts him to sleep, little couple of follow-up shots, puts him to sleep, next fight out, fights for the lightweight belt against Charles Oliveira, and again, in yet another fight, Michael Chandler, this man, you know, I mean, Gage is known as the human highlight reel, but, I mean, Chandler's right behind him, let's be honest, there can only be one human highlight, but there's 2, okay? And let's be honest, Michael Chandler, you never know, he might end up fighting for the belt again, he could even end up as the UFC lightweight champion of the world. Another guy that came over from Strikeforce, of course, was Gilbert Melendez. Gilbert Melendez was a tremendously talented fighter. He was a champion in other organizations, and he was highly touted as the best lightweight on the planet outside the UFC, or even including the UFC. And he lived up to that. Came over to the UFC, beat Diego Sanchez in his debut, and of course, fought Anthony Pettis in Las Vegas in a huge fight, which Anthony Pettis won via armbar. Here's an old school one for you. Tim Sylvia, the Maniac. Oh God, this guy's a fucking idiot, and I don't mind saying it. He's always talking shit at me on Twitter. Shut up, Tim. Nice but dim. But still, he was a, I was going to say he was a good fighter. He was all right. He was good back in the day. Came to the UFC, beat up Wesley Cabbage Carrera out of Hawaii, and then followed it up by knocking out an old friend of mine, Rico Rodriguez, to become the heavyweight champion of the world. I mean, listen, for Tim Sylvia, it was quite the love affair with the belt. It was up and down, up and down. It was almost every fight was a title fight. I mean, he won the belt, and then he defended the belt, then he got stripped of the belt for steroids.
That's fucking illegal.
Then he lost the belt, then he came back, he won the belt again.
This is #1 bullshit.
He beat Andrei Arlovski for the belt. He lost the belt to Randy Couture. I mean, it seems that almost every fight Tim Sylvia was in, there was a belt on the line. This man was gigantic, 6'8", and he looked like shit. Anyway, here's a guy that definitely lived up to the hype, Quinton Rampage Jackson. As I said, everyone's favourite werewolf over in Pride. Massive fan base, huge personality, very, very charismatic, absolutely hilarious, but a psychopath in the cage, in the ring, in the street, wherever it was. Of course, over in Pride, known as a huge knockout artist. Took part in so many legendary fights. Won most of them. Yes, he lost a few, but my God, some of the ones that he won, some of the knockouts he delivered, some of the slams and the power bombs were unbelievable. In his UFC debut, he fought Marvin the Beastman Eastman, won that fight by a very impressive knockout, and then of course got a chance to dethrone Chuck the Iceman Liddell in his second fight, but he lived up to the hype because he ended the reign. He put Iceman on ice, he put him to sleep, and that was that. And Chuck Liddell, sadly, it was never the same, but Quinton Rampage Jackson was an absolute megastar. From loud, obnoxious, werewolves, charismatic, slam page type people, to someone a little different, to someone a little quiet, someone that does his research, a WEC champion by the name of Dominick Cruz. Did you do your research? It's a bit of an unusual one, this. According to Wikipedia, on his UFC debut, he defended the WEC belt, but he also won the inaugural UFC belt, the bantamweight belt. I almost forgot, but yeah, defended the WEC, but then also won the bantamweight UFC belt at the same time against Scott Jorgensen. As I say, kind of an unusual situation, but Dominick Cruz, what a career that man had. Widely regarded as probably the greatest bantamweight ever. Certainly has the respect of all of his peers, whether they love him or they hate him and they talk shit. You cannot deny the career that Dominick Cruz has had. And as I say, another example of living up to that hype. So anyway, there it is. There's a few people for you that, came to the UFC, got fast-tracked, rightly so, to a UFC title fight, lived up to the hype, became the champ, and had a great career, made money, became famous, all the rest of it, So the path for every fighter, it's not always the same. And it was just Yuri Prochazka next week, fighting for the belt on only his third fight in the UFC. It's mind-blowing. I'm so happy for him. Of course, Glover Teixeira is a very, very tough test, and both men are going to throw down. I'll be commentating in Singapore. I cannot wait for this one. And I was just thinking about that. It's mind-blowing. I mean, how fast, how successful this man has been. And then on the flip side, you got Glover Teixeira, that much like me, took, almost 20 fights. I mean, for me, what was it again? Hold on. Gotta finish talking about myself, of course, let's be honest. For me, 26 fights in the UFC, and for Glover Teixeira, 21 fights. But that's going to be an amazing fight next week. But still, there it is. There's a little breakdown of some of the people that came to the UFC and got a title fight pretty goddamn quickly. And they deserved it. Anyway, hope you're all well. Take care. All that good stuff.